Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. As some of you may notice, I have been a bit MIA. I'm about to move across the country to a completely different environment for my orchids, and believe it or not, I'm more concerned about them than for me. So jumping right into today's video, we're going to talk about what many people like to call novelty Phalaenopsis. Now, these novelty Phalaenopsis have a different name from the standard Phalaenopsis, mainly in their appearance because the care is quite similar. So with regard to their appearance, you'll find that these flowers normally are smaller in shape. They don't tend to give you as many blooms. The textures will vary, such as them having waxy or softer feels, and many of them come with beautiful fragrances, which personally is one of my favorite parts of the novelty Phalaenopsis. Now, these differences in appearance are mainly because, unlike your standard Phalaenopsis, which are mass produced from parents that tend to bloom in the springtime or even winter in tandem with the holidays here in the States, the novelty phals are more closely related to the species, so they will bloom more generally when it's warm. Some in the spring, some in fall, but generally these guys bloom when it's warm. They don't require that temperature drop. Few of them may require a photo period of at least 12 hours, but we'll go ahead and get into that. These guys have literally created a sweet spot in my heart. As many of you know, as my name indicates, paths are my ultimate favorite. But once I found these novelty phals, I just knew they were it for me. Again, getting back to the fragrance, my sense of smell is somewhere along a canine. So when I walk into my house and around the grow space, it's literally heaven for me. So I want to make this a general chat, so let's go into how I care for these orchids, and maybe we can share in the comments about how you all care for your novelty phals as well. So jumping into the lighting / location for these phals, you want to keep your novelty phal in a medium light. Now, I know they say that low light is okay, but we want our orchids to thrive. Low light doesn't make any plant thrive. It just helps your plant sit there and look nice and just, do what it's supposed to do at the bare minimum to get by. But a nice medium light, which is sunshine with no warmth, like a bright room, what without the direct sun rays, casting a slight shadow would be perfect. It's perfect. The leaves of your novelty phal are not dark like the standard phals. They're normally a bit bright lime green, and the size will range greatly, and these leaves require a medium light to sustain. If the light is too high, some of the leaves will redden, some of them will actually become almost completely pale, and if the light is too low, the leaves will become dark and huge because they're looking for more light. I do recommend personally growing under lights because for novelty phals, many of them, because they are closely related to the species, they require at least 12 hours of sunlight or light to bloom. And here in the States, in the Northern Hemisphere, you'll only get that in the summertime. So if you want year-round blooms, you should have a grow light or invest into some grow lights. Now, I do know of some people that can, grow them just in the windowsill. But again, you will not have blooms in the wintertime, and you may need to move them away from the window in the winter, as these babies are not happy under temperatures under 70. And getting into temperature, we're gonna state that these are warm growing plants. I like to keep my grow space between 73 and 75. I'm a hot person. I love the heat. I love the warmth. I also grow indoors, so my grow space is going to be warmer than not on most days. Now here in my space, I do personally use heat mats to keep the rooting area of my novelty phals extremely warm. My cups are a bit tall, so I do like to make sure that my rooting area is warm at all times. The heat mats do run in tandem with the lights, so they're only on during the day to stimulate a bigger drop of temperature at night when they turn off. The orchids on the heat mats are also on metal trays, and these trays do provide an additional ambient heat all around. So if I were to leave the thermostat up on the top shelf with the phals and the temperature, let's say the ambient temperature is somewhere around 75 degrees, these phals are going to have an ambient temperature a bit closer to 80, which is something they enjoy year round. Now, depending on the seasons, the temperatures may go a bit up from that range or go a bit down from that range. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, our spring and summer tend to be the fast growing season, and our fall and winter, the slower season for our novelty phals. Now, during the spring and summer, because you're getting a lot of heat, a lot of sunlight, whether you're growing in a window or under your grow lights, you're going to have growth, you're going to have blooms. Again, these are not your standard phals, so they bloom in the heat when it's nice and warm, when you have those really long days. Now, on the contrary, in the fall and winter, you have your slow season. Now, as a rule of thumb, most phals do not go dormant. However, your novelty phals especially will slow in growth, and many of them will not bloom because the temperatures have fallen and because the photoperiod, the amount of light that is out, is going to go down. Now, this is where growing artificially with artificial means such as heating and artificial lights play into keeping your plant blooming all year round. Because if you can, during the fall and winter, keep your temperatures up and keep that light 12 hours and above, you will keep those blooms going. And with regard to light, just to touch back on it, during that grow season, I like to have my lights actually between 14 to 16 hours, sort of to imitate the light span that the orchids receive in the wild, as their parents are known to grow in locations very close to the equator, so we have longer days. However, in the slow season, I don't allow the lights to go below 12 hours. So again, grow season, 14 to 16 hours of light with lots of warmth, and slow season, minimum of 12 hours of light with a cooler range of temperature. Jumping into water, I do water the novelty phals right along with the standard phals, and that's when they're dry. However, my standard phals can go a day or two and miss a water because they can withstand that dry spell very well. Not the novelties. The novelties, you'll notice if you miss one watering day that they should have been watered, those roots will wrinkle. It doesn't mean your plant is dead or anything, but you should probably take a little bit more time to water them than on that next scheduled time that you water, or maybe increase. I like to learn the pot weight. It does take a while to learn the pot weight. So another way you can learn it visually is when you see the roots on the outside that you can see are gray, just water the next day because the inside of the pot has probably not yet dried yet. So it's a bit complicated process to learn. However, the novelty phals are just slightly more forgiving with a bit more extra water, again, because they're closely related to the species parents, which in nature receive a bit more water than these hybrids that we cultivate today. And with regard to the humidity with my care, I do have humidifiers in my grow space, and I maintain a humidity of at least 40% if there's no humidity outside. However, I do live in the DC area, and there's lots of humidity normally on average. So even with no humidifiers running, my humidity doesn't go below 30%. So I really don't know the effects of having absolutely no humidity because I just don't have that type of environment here. I will say, when your humidity starts to go above 70%, you have to watch the water that will develop on the leaves of the phals and watch for things like rot, because your novelty phals, especially in particular, they seem to be a bit more prone to things like crone rot and root rot than the standard phals. So I would say go ahead and watch that. And on that note, let's go into some miscellaneous things, I guess, to say, or some random tricks that I've learned about the novelties. So one of the things that I became a little obsessed about is the parentages of the phals and their species parents, because you can anticipate what you're in for. So just to give you a few examples, if you know that your plant has a lot of Violacea, a Bilina, it was probably hybridized for those beautiful round leaves and the scent. Violaceas are known for their cinnamon, spicy scents, and Bilinas are known for the sweet, light fragrances, sometimes heavy. Amboinensis, also known for the scent, is more known for the yellow and orange trait that it passes on to flowers, as well as an ability to bloom early in the spring. Also blooming early in the spring is your Schilleriana. The Schilleriana with the big pink blooms is actually the parent behind most of the pink standard phals that you see in the grocery store. And lastly, you have the Stewartiana and the Doritis, which is known as the Pulcherrima. These are known for their spike habits. The Pulcherrima is known to have a very, very strong spike. The Sogo Vivian is very well known for its Pulcherrima background. And then you have the Stewartiana that's known to have a branching spike. So when you see a lot of phals that have one spike with a lot of branches on it, highly likely that there's a Stewartiana in the parentage. And I just think knowing these things is so cool because you can sort of anticipate some sort of trait or some sort of feature that the plant is going to come with just by knowing the parents. And a couple of other things that I've noted to touch back on rot: don't let these plants stay wet. I've lost probably more novelty phals than any phals in my collection. I haven't lost a lot of plants, to be quite honest, but I've lost more novelties than anything. And I think it's because they just don't like to stay wet. I mean, every novelty does enjoy more moisture than other phals, I found out, especially the standards. But when you're leaving water in the crowns and in between the corners of the leaves, these guys are just not going to take well to it. And you should just make sure your plant is dry on watering day. Another thing is don't cut the flower spikes. Let them die off on their own, because these phals have a high tendency to rebloom over and over and over on the same spike once they get those temperature and light requirements going. And lastly, I would say if you're going to purchase novelty phals, not all of them, but intend on some big leaves. As you know, Phalaenopsis do grow upwards. The leaves just grow out and out and out from the center. But they get very round on these novelty phals, especially with certain parents, such as the Bilina, such as the Gigantea. Learning your parents in the background of your flowers is not only fun, but it's important to learn how to save on things like space, or know if you shouldn't use, synthetic fertilizers. I don't know. I can't speak today. I don't know what's going on. Or if you can't use a synthetic fertilizer on a plant versus an organic one. And with that, I leave you all a good day. I'm going to put my social media handles up on the screen. I go by The Right Path on Instagram and Facebook and share my orchid journey quite often with the mirage of photos. I'll see you all in the next video.